بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. In the beginning, just apologize for being late. Today's hadith, hadith Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أتدرون ما الغيبة؟ قالوا الله ورسوله أعلم. قال ذكرك أخاك بما يكره. قيل أفرأيت إن كان في أخي ما يقول؟ قال إن كان فيه ما تقول فقد اغتبته وإن لم يكن فيه فقد بهته. أخرجه Muslim. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked, do you know what is ghibah, backbiting is? They replied, Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam know best. He said, it is saying something about your brother which is he dislikes. You can also translate it to say something bad about your brother. Someone asked, supposing that what I said about my brother was true. And the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if what you say about him or her is true, you have backbitten him. And if it is not true, you have slandered him. Reported by Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala. This hadith also in Sunan Abi Dawood and At-Tirmidhi and Ahmad fil Musnad. It's a very famous, well-known hadith. In Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam here when he said, Atadrun, do you know? This question, we call it in Arabic istifham. لا يقصد به طلب العلم. It's not intent that when he asked, not because he was looking for an answer, to be educated or to know. It's not like he's asking for information. No. That's a way of talking to get people's attention. يسمونه للتشويق. So in Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he asked him, he knows what the answer is, but he asked them to get their attention. So they start thinking. They said, Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger knows best. Or they know best. It's not because they don't know what is ghibah. They knew what's ghibah. But that's one of the etiquettes of the Sahaba and the adab and the respect that they have for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he asked them something, they wait so they can get the knowledge from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And here's something, pay attention to it. Let's say if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked them something, then they answer, yeah, ghibah is to say this. Then he said, no, that's fine, that's right. That's one scenario, that's right. The other scenario, that they said, Allah and His Messenger knows best. Tell us, Ya Rasulullah. One of the habits of the Prophet ﷺ, that when he says something about any subject, he will say it in a very eloquent way, number one. Number two, he might add some useful information. Or say it in a way that it is very rich in its meaning. Versus them just stating it, and he said, that's okay. Actually, you wait until you hear from the Prophet ﷺ, you will have more ilm, more knowledge coming from him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Al-Ghibah, which is backbiting. It's interesting, even in English, backbiting, yani you bite this person behind his, or talk bad about him behind his back. It's backbiting. And Al-Ghibah has similar concept. Even in English, we don't have words driven from meaning usually, or that's not how it works. But in Arabic, that's how it works. When you make a word, you go to the roots of it and you'll find the root is connected to what this word means. So here we say, like insan, why he was called insan, qalb, why there's a meaning, there's a connection between the word qalb and the heart, and the actions of the heart, and so forth. So al-ghibah, it means ash-shay'ul mastur. طيب, is something hidden, or something not present. So al-ghibah is to talk about someone who's not present, who's not in front of you, who's absent. طيب? Here the key point, because the translation depends on this coming word. And that's why you find me translated in two different ways. So pay attention to it. ذكرك أخاك بما يكره. بما يكره. باء ميم ألف ما يكره. يكره dislike. Okay? ما يكره. This has two ways to understand it in Arabic language. And both ways carry two different meanings, and the rulings will be interesting here to see the difference. So the first one that you say, الماء موصولة يعني تقول ذكرك أخاك بما هو مكروه أو بمكروه. You say, you mention your brother, or you mention something bad about your brother, something disliked about your brother, okay? Or something that is hated about your brother. But if you say ما اسم موصول, the wording will be ذكرك أخاك بالذي يكره. يعني you mention your brother by saying the thing that he or she dislike. What's the difference between the first and second? The first one, I'll just make it easier. You mention things, okay, the hated things about him. The other one, you mention the thing that he hates about himself. So the first one, it means you mention anything bad. It's very general. The second one, the thing that he feels it's bad. The thing that he feels it is not appropriate. You following? Because certain things, it might be okay for some people, even if it's bad, but I don't mind. So based on the second understanding, that will not be ghiba. Okay, I give you an example. For example, it's a bad thing to drink. Drinking alcohol is a bad thing, isn't it? But there is some fasiq person who's a drunk 24 hours. He smokes drugs and he uses drugs and he doesn't care. He doesn't feel this is bad. So if I say this person drinking, and for him, it's okay. It's not something I'm ashamed of. That will not be a ghiba. Because it's not something that he feels is a shame. Another person, it is so common, he is okay to be called the short guy. For him, that's not a bad thing. But there is other person, saying the short person, it's very offensive. A guy, you tell me, the fat boy. But you say the fat girl, you're in trouble. Okay? She will not accept that. So for her will be, oh, vice versa, he or she. So when it depends, so some ulama said, bima yakra, it could relate it to the person himself, what he disliked, what he she disliked, you cannot use. Or bima yukrah, yani generally speaking, what is known to be something bad, it should not be mentioned. You got the difference? Right. Then Nabi sallallahu also this way of putting it بالذي يكره سواء ما كانت صلة أو اسم موصول, it gives a sense of generality. So that means you're not allowed to mention anything that person feels it's offensive to him, or he will be offended by it, or feel it's insult to him or to her. And that thing, it doesn't matter. If it has to do with their look, with their way of they look, carry themselves, the way they talk, if it has to do about him or family member or his work or what, anything that will offend him, make him feel bad, insulting to him, that will be haram. It doesn't matter if it's verbal or if it is by sign. That's why when Safiya was mentioned, قال حسبك منها أنها, one of the Prophet's wives said, oh, yeah, your wife, she is this. And she just made a hand gesture. Yani she's a short girl. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, you have said something so evil, so bad, that if you mix it with the seas, it will make the seas rotten. It smells bad. So the sea, you put sewage in the sea, it will not make the sea bad. It will, but it's not going to turn it to be like ruin it completely. That's right. Can you imagine? It's worse than all this. And it's so evil what you said. Even though she didn't say anything. She just made a hand gesture. You got it? So here, you see that it is words, hand gestures, or hint. Sometimes people make riba in many different ways. And Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah mentioned, some people, they will make riba to someone. So when a person is mentioned, they will say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, Allah al-musta'an, astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, Allah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. As obviously you're making the person as if it is bad. And you're making it sound like, oh, you're so religious, but it is really, oh, let's just talk about good people. I didn't say anything about him, I just said let's talk about good people, what that entails. Yeah, let's focus on the positive. Just don't talk about this. So this is a riba, an indirect way. So the hadith shows you that in any way it is riba. So it has to do with mentioning things related to his deen or dunya. It is haram. طيب. فقد بهته. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, if it is in him, this quality, this riba. If it's not in the person, it is buhtan. Al-buhtan, it's the very surprising lie. البهت بهت كدهش يعني من الدهش والتحير. Originally it means بهت, it means confused. So why the Arab use the word confused to refer to lying? Because when you lie something, you make up completely something about me, it make me confused. Is this me? You see, it is just, what? This even never happened. When this happened? How did you, so it make you kind of confused, and so that's why the word baht comes from, because if you go to the root of it, it means somebody who's confused. But the Arab used the same word to talk about someone who attribute lie to someone, because he make it up and he make people confused how this can be. طيب, what we learn from this hadith? First, this hadith is an interpretation to the verse in Surah Al-Hujurat when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. Do not backbite one another. So how we define backbiting? It is by what the Prophet ﷺ said, to mention something bad or something that your brother hates in their absence. 2, is it true that al-ghiba only for someone who is absent? If I say something bad about you in your present, would that be called ghiba? Or the person has to be absent? Listen to the hadith again. The hadith said to mention something that your brother hates. That's ghiba. The hadith did not say in his presence or in his absence, did not make any specification. So because of this, some of the ulama rahimahullah said al-ghiba is to mention something bad about your brother, something that he or she hates. It doesn't matter if they are present or absent. So al-ghiba is not only restricted to someone who's absent. Other ulama, because of this hadith, other ulama said no. Al-ghiba is to say something bad about someone who is not present, someone who is absent, or someone who cannot hear you in his back. Why? They said because that's what the word ghibah means. If you say something bad about someone in front of them, that's called sab, shatam, that's cursing, that's saying, that's insulting. It's not ghiba. The word wouldn't make any sense. Why would you use the word ghiba for something that has nothing to do with the person's absence? And that's why the majority of the ulama rahimahullah said, no, al-ghiba, one of the conditions for it is to mention something about somebody who is not present, who's something bad. And that's why it is a greater sin than just insulting. Why? Because if I'm in front of you, I can defend myself. At least I know what is said about me. But in my absence, I don't know what has been said about me. My reputation was ruined, you see? So that's why it's became major sin or more severe as a sin than just insulting someone. And also there is a narration, Ibn Abi Dunya mentioned it, attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, Al-ghiba ma karihta an tuwajiha bihi akhak fahuwa ghiba. The ghiba is the thing that you will not say it in front of your brother. طيب. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في الحديث said, ذكرك أخاك, to mention your brother or your sister. What that means, obviously it's not your blood brother or blood sister, and anyone who's considered. Why did he mention a brother? Is to make you feel so bad about it. Because all Muslims and all believers are brothers and sisters. إنما المؤمنون إخوة, Allah يقول. Allah said all believers are brothers and sisters. So it make you feel, he's not a stranger, he's my brother. Even if I don't know him, he is a brother to you, which it makes you feel that this is something bad, that I'm backbiting my brother. Is that exclude non-Muslims and fasiqs who commit major sins openly? I'll talk about this in a little bit. But the word akhuk, your brother, doesn't really mean necessarily excluding them. Because also there's a brothers and sisters in humanity, but the point is he's like a brother to you. And شوف الآية القرآنية لا يغتب بعضكم بعضا. Do not bite one on another. But the word in Arabic بعضكم بعضا, يعني you are some of, like, don't bite as if this ummah is like one body. So don't basically attack your own body. Don't backbite your own self by attacking your brothers, because you are all, in the end of the day, like one body, one nation. طيب. Al-ghiba, it is haram, no doubt. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Hujurat, وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. That's forbidding people to backbite. And he did not only say that, he said, أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. Would you like to eat? You eat the flesh of your brother, a dead corpse, you go and dig it from the graveyard and eat it. It's absolutely haram. Absolutely nobody will desire such thing. That's exactly what happened to you when you backbite your brother. And in one incident, the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam heard somebody's backbiting. The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, I can see the flesh of that person's in between your teeth, and as if you were eating his body. طيب. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم said, كل المسلم على المسلم حرام دمه وماله وعرضه. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم said, haram for you to transgress against your Muslim brothers in regard to their blood by hitting, killing, or their wealth, stealing from him, cheating him, or ird, which is his honor, accusing, lying, backbiting, and so forth. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم said in Sahih Muslim, لا تحاسدوا, do not envy one another, ولا تباغضوا. Then he said, ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا, and do not backbite each other. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم said, إن من أربى الربا. It was reported that the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said one of the worst form of riba, and we all know riba is one of major sin in Islam. One of the worst form of riba is al-istitala fi ard al-muslim bighayri haqq, is to increase your assault and gossip and backbiting, your brother's honor. or you violate your brother's honor. طيب, is it a major sin or a minor sin? The vast majority of the ulama consider backbiting as a major sin. Even Qurtubi rahimahullah said, I don't know any disagreement between the scholars that it is a major sin. And Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, who wrote a very famous book in collecting the major sin in Islam, it's called Al-Zawajir an Iqtiraf al-Kaba'ir. He said there is plenty of evidence to show that al-ghiba is one of the major sin in Islam. Because the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said your blood and your wealth is haram, and his honor, your honor as well. So killing a Muslim is haram, stealing the Muslim's money is haram, and backbiting the Muslim is haram as well. طيب. But there is no consensus. As a matter of fact, some of the fuqaha said, no, it is not a major sin, it's a minor sin. And among the people who said that, Al-Ghazali rahimahullah, or Al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali, and also among them, صاحب العمدة من الشافعية, الصنعاني rahimahullah said, and among them as well, the author of the book Al-Umdah. And I think he meant by that عمدة السالك وعدة الناسك للإمام شهاب الدين أبي العباس أحمد بن لؤلؤ القاهري الشافعي, the known as Ibn al-Naqib al-Misri. He's a very famous Shafi'i scholar. Zarkashi rahimahullah said, I'm amazed by someone who consider eating the dead bodies haram and major sin, yet he can say backbiting is a minor sin. It never makes sense to me, he said. But some of the Shafi'iyya has very interesting tafsir. Like Ibn al-Attar in his Hashiyah, he said, قال النجاري والمفتى به الآن, the fatwa now is, أنها كبيرة في حق العلماء الأتقياء والصالحين. If you backbite a scholar, a righteous person, a well-known righteous person, or a person of taqwa, it is a major sin. But if you backbite someone else, especially those who make sins and sinners and make major sin, the backbiting in regard to them is a minor sin. But there is no proof for that. What I think it is more correctly is that it is a major sin. But when you backbite al-ulama wa righteous and the awliya, and this major sin are not one level. Major sins are many different levels. It rises to one of the highest level of major, the highest form or the worst form of ghiba is to make ghiba to the righteous people or to the scholars. But it doesn't mean that the rest are minor sin. What about the non-Muslims? Is backbiting the non-Muslims haram? Because the Prophet in Al-Quran says, أخوك, your brother. And obviously your brother here in Islam. Let me start with this. Number one, we have to, all of us agree, that al-mu'min, as the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in Hadith Tirmidhi, ليس بالفاحش ولا البذيء. Al-mu'min is not a person who is, have bad manners, a person who speaks ill of people, ta'an, la'an, and no doubt backbiting is one of these qualities. So the mu'min has been, every Muslim was ordered to protect his tongue and not to say bad things about people, regardless who those people are. So that's number one. Number two, some ulama said, when it comes to the non-Muslims, if the backbite has to do with his physical, how tall he is, his nose, his eyes, his skin color, that's absolutely forbidden, absolutely haram, because not making fun of him as a person, you're making fun of the one who created him, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you backbite or you mention his bad manners and the kufr that he does, like adultery or drinking or things of that nature, they said it is not a backbite. But that doesn't solve the problem. What about if somebody backbites someone who's not Muslims about being stingy, or being funny, or making fun of someone, like mention bad things about them? You know, it didn't like solve the problem what those people, what at least this individual said. Some ulama said, no. It is not allowed to backbite a non-Muslim if he is a dhimmi. What's dhimmi? A dhimmi is the one who lives under the protection of Muslims. Under the protection of Muslims, like who live among Muslims. As for the one who is muharib, someone who fighting the Muslims, it is not allowed. Sorry, it is allowed. Someone who is fighting the Muslims are allowed. And they said, and the proof for that, that the Nabi ﷺ in the day of Qurayza, he said, Uhjuhum wa Jibreel ma'ak. He said to Hassan, he said, Uhjuhum, al-hija in Arabic language, is to make poetry mentioning the bad things about others. Like when I make a poetry making fun of someone, or not fun, mentioning the bad quality of someone, that's called hija. It's a poetry all about criticism, about criticizing you and mentioning the bad thing in you. So if the Nabi ﷺ telling Hassan to do this about the mushrikeen, that's a backbite. Because Hassan with the Prophet ﷺ and those mushrikeen in the other side. They're not in front of him. That's not backbite. So they said, but those who engage of harb, in war. So that's why ulama, based on this hadith and this incident, and then other hadith as well, they said, in a case of you are in a war, or those people who are showing animosity, like, you know, these Islamophobes who show animosity to Islam, you know, but there is no backbiting or nothing about them. For me, wallahu a'lam, I believe that al-ghiba as a ruling, like to eating the flesh of someone, that as a major sin, it is actually related to the Muslims only. But it can be a minor, or it can be something, a bad manners, and it can be haram too, highly disliked when it comes to the non-Muslim. So in the end of the day, we agree that we should not backbite a Muslim or non-Muslim. But the Muslim is more severe. As for al-fasiq, the one who is committing major sins and never repented from it, al-ulama rahimahumullah debated over this. And for the bottom line, al-fasiq is still a Muslim and is still your brother. So you're not allowed to backbite him. That's the bottom line. But what you're allowed to do, even though it's technically considered ghiba, but is allowed, is to mention his fisq. Like, for example, some dictators who put people in jail, steal people's money, and you mention that. Someone who, you know, do corrupt things, or somebody who drink openly, gay, homosexuality, or he is openly doing that, and you mention that, even if he dislikes that, it doesn't matter because he's open about it. And we go back to the meaning of the hadith. ذكرك أخاك بالذي يكره، يعني الذي يكرهه هو. فإن كان لا يكرهه فلا حرج في الذكر. So it is something that they openly say it. It's not something that it is a backbite in this case. But even if they dislike it and they openly do it, it is haram. It is not haram. But what is haram is to give for yourself an open invitation or green light to start making fun of his family, of his look, his all these kind of things, which has nothing to do with his munkar, with the bid'ah that he does or the haram that he practices. And one of the evidence for making ghibah to someone who's fasiq, to warn people from their fisq, what the Nabi sallallahu in Sahih al-Bukhari or Muslim, a man came and the Nabi sallallahu told Aisha, "Bi'sa akhu al-ashira." What are the worst man in the tribe? He told Aisha this while the man didn't enter the tent yet or enter the house yet. So he said this about him in his absence. No doubt he will hate that. But that was not a backbite from the Prophet ﷺ. He said this to warn them from the person. Yani be careful what you say in front of this guy. So from this, the ulama rahimahullah said, if you mention someone with something bad in their absence to warn people from it, it is allowed. And that's what Imam Nawawi rahimahullah mentioned in regard to this hadith. Also, similar to this, mentioning something bad about someone, but this is the thing that identify the person. Like for example, you say, Al-A'raj. Al-A'raj what means? The limping man. Even though it's a very famous scholar. They call him the limping person. But limping is not a good thing. It's just a defect in the person. But they said, the handicapped person. Or sometimes you see in the hadith, the man with the big hands or small hands. Okay? So the big hand, dhil yadain, or al-a'mash, blurry eyes, the blind, the deaf. Sometimes these are, it's not ghiba because that's how you identify the person. I didn't mention it, as a form of making fun of the person, but to identify the person. Oh, you mean the big guy, the big guy, the big tummy guy? Yeah. Okay, that's Shaykh Waleed. You don't mean to backbite me, just to identify me. Alhamdulillah, I don't have a big tummy, but that's okay. But the next point, what about backbiting unknown person? What I mean by unknown? Unknown to you. What if I say, there is this guy, this about the person, without mentioning him or her, and none of you know that person. لا غيبة لمجهول. A rule. There is no ghiba for unknown person. That's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sometimes he would say, ما بال أقوام وأقوام. Some people did this and did that. There's no ghiba here. Okay? Also, what if someone said, you know what? Somebody that day said, oh, I made a joke about, let's say, people from certain culture or country or city. Let's say made fun of Scottish, for example, or Irish, or, hey, those, whatever, some country or some quality in people. Like to say somebody made a joke or said something about people with red hair or blonde hair or whatever, or Saidi, like in Egypt or something like that. Somebody said, oh, you made ghiba to each and every one from that culture. See how many sin that you, and some khutbah even get so excited, those will be all on the day of judgment like ghiba to them, commit a major sin against every one of them. That's not true. That's not ghiba. It's not good manners, especially if you're making fun and you're belittling people, or and it's something insulting, or if someone from there will feel insulted. But you not specifically mention someone by name, just a general concept. That's not considered ghiba. And one of the evidence that the ulama rahimahumullah, مثلا صاحب البحر الرائق في الحنفي رحمه الله said إذا رجل اغتاب أهل قرية لم تكن غيبة حتى يسمي قوما بأعينهم. If somebody made ghiba to a people of city or a city, this people, this city, he didn't make ghiba unless he mentioned one person by name that known to people. طيب. It is not something I'm not encouraging you to do or to say, but it's not ghiba specifically. Ghiba is a major sin. طيب. There is a famous incident, Hadith Zara. Hadith Zara, 10 women or 11 women gathered and they start talking about their husbands. And some of them mentioned things about their husbands, which is very bad. Wasn't this a backbite? And Aisha telling Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam about that. Were Aisha backbiting that husband? No, because these husbands and these women and their spouses are unknown to Aisha or to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's a story about people before. You see? So it's a story. We don't know them personally. That's why ulama said it wasn't a backbiting. It was not a backbite. What is the kafara, the expiation for backbiting? If you do any backbiting, you remember this is a major sin. You need to make istighfar from it and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to never let you fall into this again. Number two, if you can ask the person to forgive you, that would be great. You ask forgiveness from the person, because the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man kanat lahu madlamatun li akhihi min irdihi." If you have violated someone's honor, you did something that wrong to them, in relation to their honor, psychologically or like emotionally or verbally or anything, like you hurt them, even if it's not physical hurt, you should ask forgiveness from them before a day will come where there is no money between both of you. It will be taken from your good deeds according to the size of your madlama, according to the size of your sin against him. And if you don't have any good deeds to give, it will be taken from his bad deeds and put on you. This is reported by Al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala. So that's why you should ask the person for forgiveness. طيب, but what if the person didn't know that I backbite him? Like I backbite a person and he didn't know that. Should I tell him, hey, by the way, yesterday I backbite you in front of people? And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said, if he never knew about it, don't tell him. لا تعلمه. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. What you should do, you should say good things about him in his absence in front of the same group that you backbite him in front of. Let's say you have a group of people gathered and in front of your brothers, you mentioned something about your cousin. You know what, gather your brother and said, hey, my cousin, what we said is wrong and wasn't supposed to say something like that. And by the way, he's good and whatever good thing you know about him. And Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah said, كفارة الغيبة أن تستغفر لمن اغتبته. Hasan al-Basri said the expiation of ghiba is to ask forgiveness for the person that you backbite. So if I backbite Ahmad, I said, Allahumma ghafir Ahmad, Allahumma afu, in his absence. Some ulama said, no, actually you have to go and to ask the person. طيب, if with a condition, and Nawawi rahimahullah said, if you know that by telling him he will forgive you, that's good. But if you know, if you tell him, that will make the problem bigger. Oh, so you were backbiting me yesterday. That's what I thought. And it will become bigger problem. With who, inshallah, you are doing that? And it will create more problem between you and him and other people. In this case, you should not tell him. You should not tell him. Does he need to tell him what exactly he said about him? Two opinions among the Shafi'iyya, Nawawi rahimahullah said. Some said yes, and some said, no, you don't have to. You just say, forgive me, I backbite you. And that's more likely to be correct. And if you know that this will cause more damage, as Ibn Muflih and Jama'ah, Shaykh Islam bin Taymiyyah, and Nawawi, and many scholars said, you don't need to say anything to the person. طيب. Hudayfa radiallahu anhu, كفارة من اغتبته أن تستغفر له. Hudayfa also said the kafara for someone that you backbite is to ask Allah forgiveness for him. Abdullah ibn Mubarak said to Sufyan ibn Uyayna, التوبة من الغيبة أن تستغفر لمن اغتبته. He said to ask forgiveness for the person who you backbite. Sufyan ibn Uyayna said, no, it's to ask forgiveness from what you said about him. Then Ibn Mubarak said, لا تؤذوه مرتين. don't hurt that person twice by mentioning bad things about him in his absence, and now you say it in front of his face. You know, it will hurt him. That's like a double problem. He said, don't do that, basically. One thing I want to mention as well, one of the relating point, if your brother came to you and asked, or sister said, hey, I backbite you, please forgive me, don't ask about the details, just said you are forgiven. You are forgiven. Ibn Sirin passed by people, and after he passed them by a little bit, a man came, run, and followed him. And he said, Ya Ibn Sirin, Ya Abu Bakr. He said, yes. He said, please forgive us. We said something bad about you earlier when you passed by us. Halilna. You know, please forgive us. He said, أنا لا أحل ما حرم الله. I cannot say it's halal, you're forgiven, because that's belong to Allah. But what is belong to me, because it's a sin. Al-Ghiba, it's a sin, has two sides. The human beings, and you violated one of the code of Allah. So it's between you and Allah as a sin, and between you and humans. He said, what is for me, I forgive it. Don't worry about me. But what is between you and Allah, that's something you have to deal with it. You sincerely repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Ghiba is one of the reasons for spreading animosity in society. And by the way, Al-Ghiba opened the door for other things, because most likely a person so used to Ghiba will end up making buhtan, which is attributing things not even true. Al-Ghiba is it is haram in Islam because of the damage it does to the society. There is certain punishments were mentioned in regard to Al-Ghiba. And we see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it's like eating the flesh of your brother. In Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam passed by two graves and he said they are punished for something that is major. One of them kana yamshi bin namima, gossip, speak bad about people. That's also a form of ghiba. In Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the day of Al-Isra, I passed by people who have very long nails. They will do like this to their face, and they will scratch their faces until you see the bones and the flesh goes down. I said, Ya Jibreel, who are they? Then he said, those are the people who backbite people. وَيَقَعُونَ فِي أَعْرَاضٍ يَغْتَابُونَ النَّاسَ. They backbite people and they say bad things about them and they violate people's honor. In Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was mentioned to him a woman who died. He said she is in hellfire. They said, Ya Rasulullah, or a woman, I don't know if just a woman. And in Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said she is in hellfire. They said, Ya Rasulullah, صوامة, she prays, she fasts, she's a good abid. Then Nabi قال she كانت تؤذي جيرانها بلسانها. She used to hurt her neighbor with her tongue. Yani say bad things about them. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said, do you know Al-Muflis, the one who will run bankrupt? And maybe you all know the hadith. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, is the one who will come in the day of judgment with salah and siyam and zakah, but he insulted this person, he backbited this person, until his hasanat will be taken from him and given to those who he harmed, and their sins will be given to him. Then he will be going to hellfire. وَقَدِمْنَا إِلَى مَا عَمِلُوا مِنْ عَمَلٍ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ هَبَاءً مَنْثُورًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Humazah, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. Wail is a great punishment in hellfire. For who? هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. Al-Humazah الذي يأكل لحوم الناس. Al-Humazah, Mujahid said, the one who backbite people. Wal-Lumazah is the person who accuse people with falsehood. It is important, one of the points I will, before, I only have 2 more points left. One of the points in relation to this hadith, if you hear someone backbite in front of you, don't just remain silent. Don't be complicit. Don't be a partner. Said that's haram, don't do that. You know why backbite is so common? Because people don't speak up in the gathering. If someone said something like that, just say, hey, it's not allowed. That's haram. You can't do that. Allah قال وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا اللَّغْوَ أَعْرَضُوا عَنْهُ. when they hear al-laghu is any talk which is false, talk which is haram. They stay away from it. In Surah Al-Qasas, Allah said, "Inna as-sam'a wal-basara wal-fu'ada kullu ulaika anhu mas'ula." You will be asked about anything that you hear, you see. So your ear, your eye, your heart, your mind, you will be asked about it. So Allah will ask about what you heard from those people and they're backbiting your brothers and sisters. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في مسند الإمام أحمد said, من ذب عن عرض أخيه بالغيب كان حقا على الله أن يعتقه من النار. في رواية ذب الله عنه النار. If you protect your brother or sister's honor in their absence, Allah will protect you from the hellfire in the day of judgment. اغتاب مرة رجل عند معروف الكرخي. معروف الكرخي أبو ريحانة. Somebody backbite someone in front of him. So معروف told him, اذكر القطن إذا وضع على عينيك. Remember the day when they put cotton in your ear and in your eyes. When you die, that's what they do. They put cotton in the eyes, cotton on the ear. He said, remember that day. Yahya ibn al-Husayn, he said, دار بين سعد بن أبي وقاص وخالد بن الوليد كلام. Sa'd ibn Waqqas, Khalid ibn Walid, they had argument and it became very aggressive between them. A man came to Sa'd and started saying bad things about Khalid ibn Walid. Then Sa'd immediately backbiting Khalid. Then Sa'd immediately just had a fight with him. When somebody started backbiting Khalid ibn Walid, he said, Ma, stop. إن ما بيننا لم يبلغ ديننا. يعني ما بيننا من العداوة والشر لم يبلغ ديننا. He said, what's between me and Khalid, the disagreement and the fight that we had, it will not reach our deen. Yani it will not corrupt our deen. It will not allow me to corrupt my deen. It's haram to backbite. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh said, and this is one of the things that I will end with, اذكر أخاك إذا غاب عنك بما تحب أن يذكرك به ودع ما تحب أن يدع منك. When your brother is not present, mention the things about him that you would like him to mention about you in your absence. And don't say the thing that you would not like him to mention about you in your absence. Same thing do to your brother. Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu once was passing with his students and people around him by a mule which is old and rotten, and he said, Wallahi, to fill your stomach from this dead animal, it's easier than to eat your brother's flesh by backbiting him. Ibn Sirin said, إن أكثر الناس خطايا أكثرهم ذكرا لخطايا الناس. The most sinful person is the person who always talks about people's mistakes and sins. Al-Sha'bi rahimahullah said, Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, Al-Abbas one told his son, Abdullah, my son, أرى أمير المؤمنين يدنيك, I see the Khalifa bring you closer to him and he trusted you. فاحفظ مني ثلاثة, so know this. لا تغتب من له سر ولا يسمعن منك كذبا ولا تغتابن عنده أحدا. Yani, he said, do not ever backbite anyone in front of him. One of the things that he said. Also, Ya'la ibn Ubayd, he said, I was with Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah. A man came to him and he said, Abu Abdullah al-Sallal. فقال سفيان يا أبا عبد الله الحديث الذي روي أن الله يبغض أهل بيت اللحميين. He said, what do you think of this hadith where Allah hates the people who the people who eat or consume a lot of meat? Is it has to do with the meat, yani the beef and the meat? He said, no, the one who eats the people's meat, human flesh. قال الذين يأكلون لحوم الناس. Abu Asim said, since I know ghiba is haram, I never backbite anyone. وقيل للحسن, so and so backbite you. Then he said, I sent him a plate with dates and fruits. They said, why did you do that? He said, thank you for giving me your hasanat. Last night you backbite me, and I want to thank you for giving me hasanat. Yani, even Ibn al-Mubarak said, if I would backbite anyone, it will be my parents, so they can take my hasanat, so they can take my reward at the day of judgment. You know, but I'm not going to do this to them or to anyone else. Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah, somebody told him, I heard that you backbite me. Hasan al-Basri said, son, ما بلغ قدرك عندي أن أحكمك في حسناتي. You for me, no one to make you have a control over my hasanat in the day of judgment, to take it. I never backbite you. I don't want someone like you to be in control of my good deeds in the day of judgment or take it away from me. I do all this hard work and you just come and collect it from me in the day of judgment. No, son, I didn't do that. So here, something like maybe we can end with, it's important for us to watch our tongue. It's to learn how to stop ghiba. Ibn Wahab, هذا العالم المصري الكبير, he said, I used to mention people, backbite. So I said, every day, every time I backbite, I will fast. قال فأنهكني الصيام. Siyam became so, I fast too many days, became hard. I said, you know what, I'm going to give dirham every time I said something about somebody. He said, فحب الدراهم جعلني أترك الغيبة. My love for money taught me not to backbite anyone, because I keep giving. In other words, the person has to be honest with himself. If you have a problem talking about people, you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to work on it. One of the things is, if you do it, ask yourself why I do it. Do I do it when I stay late? Do I do it around certain people? Do I start to avoid this gathering? You know, you have to learn and to see what are the reasons for this backbite to happen, and to avoid it, and to make istighfar, and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you. And also, make sure that we don't allow people to make ghibah. And if you do that, ask someone, hey, if you ever heard me saying something about somebody, please tell me stop. Stop me. Don't take it lightly. And please, please, let's make sure that we teach our children not to backbite from the early age. Don't allow them to talk bad about people in school. Don't allow them to talk bad people about, your brothers and sisters in their absence. Teach them what ghiba is and how important for you not to backbite or to gossip. It's something that, it's a habit if you don't have. Maybe just very quickly, there is no ghiba in consulting. Like, I want to consult you about someone. Can I hire this person? He works for you. What is his work ethics? So when you consult, I'm allowed to give you the right feedback. When it comes to marriage, also, is he a good person for my wife, for my daughter, for my sister? I'm going to marry this woman. Is she's good? He's good. That's why when Fatima said, Ya Rasulullah, Fatima bin Qais said, Ya Rasulullah, Al-Jahm proposed to me, Usama proposed to me, Sufyan, Muawiyah proposed to me. He said, Muawiyah su'luk la mala lah. Muawiyah is poor, has no, su'luk, like a loser type. He doesn't have any money. And Bunjam, a person who always have the stick on his, he beats, he hits women. He's very aggressive. So that's something nobody would like to be described this way. But he said that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a form of being sincere advice to the woman. So in a case, the third one, in front of the judge. In front of the judge, there's no backbite. I can tell the judge exactly what happened to me. The wife, the husbands, the partners, a case, witness, so there's no backbite. In ilm al-hadith, in the scholars who in hadith, when they talk about the narrators, is this, like for example, he's kadhab, he's a liar, he's a weak narrator. So there's no backbiting in case like this. Also, there's no backbite in ta'rif, which is I mentioned earlier. If I identify the person by being the limping man or the hand man or the man with the big hands, these are not backbite. It's just I meant to identify the person with what he has. Also, when you mention the bid'ah of someone, let's say I'm going to mention somebody who's making bid'ah and, to warn people from it. There's no bid'ah, there's no harm in this. The last one, when I mention somebody's wrong deeds, sins and wrongdoing, to warn people from it, there is no ghibah by doing that. These are the areas where al-ghibah is not considered ghibah. These are exceptions from the rules. And it's obvious because of the benefit. With this, we'll come to the conclusion of our class today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us. Sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad. I have a talk actually, start at 9 o'clock all the way to 1:30 a.m.